right now I feel so emotional because I know that God has sent this book for me, but for people, because we've gotten away from. Now in our church is a spirit-led, spirit-filled church, but I was saying on the radio this morning, so many people, God allowed the world to stop, the whole world to stop, literally, for almost 6 months. And you can feel as the states are opening up, you can feel the anxiety and the need for all of us to get back into that vicious cycle. And I started thinking, what did we really learn from being quarantined all of those months? You know, it was about something. It wasn't, I mean, yeah, it was about the virus and COVID and all of that, but I think that it was deeper than that. And this book had sat on my desk for I don't know how long. And one day, like, the Spirit just drew me to it, and I opened it, and I just felt like that was God saying, okay, I really want you to understand my presence and being present in life, not just, going through the daily routine of everything that we do. And if you're a business owner, then, you had some challenges during this time. So what will your business look like? What will it do? And all of these emotions put you back on the hamster's wheel. And I think for me, with this book, it was God directly saying, trust me, choose my presence, and don't worry about all of these ancillary things that you think you have to do.
And you're 100% correct. It's like, I feel in my own experience, when God told us exactly how to do that. In Psalm 46:10, he says, be still and know that I am God. See, but so many people, unfortunately, I believe, think that was sort of a suggestion. It wasn't a suggestion, it was a command. It was God telling us to take responsibility for our inner well-being through his presence in this moment that we all have access to every minute of every day. But unfortunately, so many of us don't believe that's possible. That's why in the book, I stress the fact that it's not about an answer, it's about an action. It's only through stillness that God can teach us, for one simple reason. As Christians, we believe God reveals himself to us every day, and he does. But what we fail to recognize is that God is always in the present moment, revealing himself to us. And unfortunately, we ourselves are rarely in the present moment. It's connecting with that peace and that power that has the power to change us. And that's the gift.
You know what, Jim? It wasn't until I think I picked this book up and started reading it that I realized that my body was present a lot of times. And I've read so many books on meditation and being present. But I realized that a lot of life is about going through the motion of life and checking the box and getting it done. We all have, or many of us have, our lists of things, whether they're written or they're in our minds, things that we want to do. And sometimes you can just mindlessly go through the day and really not connect with the Spirit of God that Scripture says leads and guides us into all truth. And that's where I think I am, or I was, until I I had the awakening again, because for me, the quarantine was an awakening. And again, it was like God was prompting me, okay, I need you in my presence, and I need you to stop cheating me. And that's really what I felt when as I'm reading the book.
Oh, absolutely. It's sort of like this. When you practice presence, and you, especially using the app, that's why we made the app, in order to take the resistance out of actually practicing presence, and it reduces the resistance tremendously. So when we practice presence in the morning, it becomes our foundation, because we realize we know exactly what we're looking for throughout the day. And when we get the hourly reminder to take 3 conscious breaths or more, it grounds us in the present moment. So we're never too far from the present moment, as long as we're doing it consistently. If we do it intermittently, unfortunately, it makes it much more difficult to get back to the present moment. And what we call that is inner conditioning. So we're conditioning ourselves to recognize when unease is starting to build up within us. And the power of presence is that when we bring in stillness, we connect with a power that we do not have access to when we're in what we call our unconscious mind, living through memory or anticipation, thinking or obsessing about something that did happen, or thinking or obsessing about something that may happen. And that's God's gift to us. We have access always.
I want to take a break here, but when we come back, I want to talk about, I want people to understand, people that have not yet read the book, inner conditioning and the conscious mind and presence, and really what those terms mean, because I think that for so long, especially when meditation and presence became popular or became part of the culture, we started using those terms, but what do they really mean? And how do you really shut your mind down for those few minutes and really connect with the spirit that is within us, if we're believers? Stay on point. We're going to talk more about choosing presence right after this. Welcome back, everybody, to the OPT Network. Our guest this morning is Jim Heaney, and he is the author of Choosing Presence: How to Access God's Peace and Release Fear, Anxiety, and Stress. And so many people, Jim, talk about how to do that, but never before have I felt like I really had a guide. The app sort of gives you a guide. But before we talk about the guide and how we really find presence, let's talk about some of the words that you use in the book that help people to understand how interconnectedness or consciousness, how they really work.
Okay. Well, first of all, if you're reading the book, everything starts with stillness. Now, when we actually become still, and naturally still through breath, because breath is spirit. And as we become still, once we stop the distractions, there always is initially calmness, but that calmness evolves into a sense of peace. And what everyone has to ask themselves, well, where does this peace actually originate? Where does it come from? It doesn't come from me. I can't create it and I can't control it. I can only be present to it. So what it is a power greater than us working through us. But the access point is always stillness. And without stillness, we're not going to get very far. because we cannot think our way into presence. But
We can't
do,
think our way into presence.
correct.
Wow.
But we do far too often think our way into anxiety and stress and worry, which diminishes our self-esteem. And that's probably, not probably, it is the biggest problem in our society today. It's the circumstances of our life naturally create problems for us, but it's how we react to them in our unconscious mind. And when I say our unconscious mind, again, I'm saying living through memory or anticipation. And once we realize through the practice of presence is in that unconscious mind, when we're out of the present moment, that's where we create all our inner fears and all our inner conflicts. And God has told us simply how to resolve that, how to allow Him to resolve that. And the peace and presence of the present moment, that is what resolves it. But in order to have confidence in it, we have to do it consistently.
And so you talk about inner conditioning, and then you talk about, not necessarily in this order, but ego. Let's talk about ego first.
Yeah. If we identify, give you an example, if we asked ourselves, anytime we had fear, anxiety, worry, lack of self-esteem, felt alone and isolated, and we said to ourselves, am I present in this moment? 100% of the time, the answer will be no. And that negative energy comes from our negative ego. Now, on the other hand, anytime we felt calm, peace, love, connectedness, and we asked ourselves, am I present right now in this moment? 100% of the time, the answer is yes. So once we realize something very important, our ego is insecure and fear-filled. It cannot penetrate our presence. It can only penetrate our absence. And that is when we are out of the present moment, because then we are actually out of reality. And our negative ego creates stories in our mind that we totally believe when we're unconscious. It's only coming into the present moment when we get a true perspective of reality now. That's God's gift to us.
Okay, I think somebody missed that, because the ego, I mean, the ego can act in a negative or a positive way, can't it?
Oh, there's certainly a positive ego. That's why I say negative ego energy. Positive ego energy is when we're doing something for all of us, for my brother, for my sister. That's positive ego. And we do that a lot. We do that as parents. We do that as, I've been working in the jail system for over 20 years. I work with the homeless. That's positive ego. But also, when we create all this inner negativity, that is absolutely our negative ego that is guiding us, because we are unconscious, living through memory or anticipation.
And I guess the key thing that I'm trying to figure out on this journey, because I was telling you that, I think reading the book, you have to just take it in small doses, because really the natural mind wants to try to think its way through it, because that's the ego, I guess, thinking that you can somehow figure this thing out, the thing that you've never figured out, but you're trying to convince yourself that you can. And I'll give you an example. So in the mornings, for the last maybe 2 weeks, I've started the morning practice of stillness. And so I wake up and I'm making sure that I follow the specific instructions of how the morning practice should be. And so you write that you should either sit in a comfortable chair, you should go to a comfortable place, quiet place, or you should sit on the floor. And so I choose the floor. And then we're taking in the breaths, and we're placing our hands over our hearts because of the energy that's there. But sometimes even in focusing on the breath and filling my lungs with air, my mind will still drift off. And you write about what we should understand about that. Tell us about that.
Yes. Like even when we are practicing presence and let's say thoughts come into our mind, what we have to do is just watch them. Because when we watch them, what happens is they dissipate. Because as we become more present, even thoughts popping into our mind cannot penetrate our presence. But it's all about, again, inner conditioning, starting that morning practice. And as we do it, and then especially throughout the day, every hour, taking those 3 conscious breaths, it gives us a sense of empowerment that we know how to stop the inner fears and conflicts that we create when we are unconscious. And it's all about that inner confidence. And the inner confidence only comes from consistently practicing presence. And the app makes that so easy. I'll give you an example. Before, when I made the app, okay, I made it, again, to take the resistance out of practicing presence. My wife has been practicing presence with me for over 20 years, but very intermittently. She'll do it for 2 days a week and sometimes 3, and then she'll skip a week or 2. Since we started using the app every day, she has not missed a day, which tells me this works for the average person. The average person that says, I have so much, I'm so busy and I just don't have time to meditate, to practice presence. When you use that app, it immediately, I feel, calms you down.
It does.
And walks you through some very important steps, meaning that how important it is to make the practice a foundation, meaning that when you practice presence in the morning, you know exactly what you're looking for. And then as you start taking 3 conscious breaths every hour, again, you're reinforcing. And you may not have the same inner experience during the day as you do in the morning when you do it for 20 minutes, but you definitely will have moments of inner calm and inner peace that we simply do not have without bringing in stillness.
Let's take a break here, but when we come back, I want to talk about if this can work for anybody. And I want you to speak to those people that are feeling fear and anxiety. You're in California. There's fear in California about the fires. We're in Louisiana. There's fear about the hurricanes, fear about the pandemic, anxiety, stress. The list goes on and on and on. And how we help people to make an intention to practice presence. Stay on point. We're back after this. Welcome back, everybody, to the OPT Network. Our guest this morning is Jim Heaney, and we're talking about choosing presence, how to access God's peace and release fear, anxiety, and stress. And so in the last segment, I talked about all of the things that are happening around people. People have been displaced in Louisiana, still trying to recover from the hurricane, not knowing what the future is going to hold. Parents that have kids in school are trying to figure out, should they continue to virtual learn? Should I put them in the classroom? Just all sorts of balls in the air. And I want to know, for people who may say, you know what, I don't necessarily have a relationship with any deity. Can this work for me? What do you say to those people?
The answer is absolutely yes. Now, it can't work, obviously, unless you actually do the practice.
Right.
And when you do the practice, let's say you're not a big believer, okay? As you do the practice and you start slowing down all the inner negative dialogue, and you start feeling calm, and you start eventually feeling a sense of peace, the first thing you have to ask yourself is, where does this originate, this peace? It certainly doesn't originate from me.
Right.
And when you answer that question to yourself, then you start to realize that there truly is. Now, you may not say it's God. You may say it's a higher power, or you may say it's a life force. No matter what words you use for it, you know that there's something beyond you working through you when you become still inside. See, the practice of presence, here's the real gift. It answers three very important questions that have an enormous effect on our inner well-being. And the first question is, do I know why I'm at peace? And it answers that. And the second question is, do I know why I am not at peace? And it answers that. And the third question, most important, if I am not at peace, do I know how to come back to peace? And by answering those three questions, that frees us from the inside. That empowers us to know that we are taking responsibility for our inner well-being through the peace and the power of the present moment, which is God's spiritual energy. But what people make the mistake sometimes when they meditate, practice presence, is that they do it intermittently. And unfortunately, doing it intermittently doesn't inner condition us. Because if we practice presence in the morning and then only take 3 conscious breaths once or twice a day, the problem is we build up all that negative energy within us, makes it much more difficult to get back to the present moment. And sometimes people will say, well, you know, I don't have time, I'm too busy. No, that's not really true. Because who doesn't have time to breathe? You can take 3 conscious breaths. As I'm talking to you, you could be taking them.
Right.
When we're driving, when we're working, when we're with people, when we're alone, it doesn't matter. But when we do it consistently, the motivation to continue is the unmistakable difference of what we experience inside when we stop all that negative dialogue, which is completely out of reality. Reality is this moment. And in this moment, we do not create fear and anxiety and worry.
And so we're really creating that for ourselves then, aren't we? With the
Absolutely.
negative dialogue. And I was thinking about that this morning as I was walking over to have this conversation with you. And I was just sort of in my mind going over this event that happened in my life that is a past event. And I was saying, God, why can't I let that go? And at this moment, I just realized that we don't let things go because we don't want to. I mean, we say we want to, but if we want to, then why don't we just let it go?
And the reason we don't let it go is because when we have that inner fear, inner conflicts about any situation, it's always in an unconscious state. And in an unconscious state, we ourselves are not stable. We ourselves are insecure. When we get into the stability and security of the present moment, to the peace and power that we always experience there when we bring in stillness, then we make the right decisions. Then letting go isn't very difficult because we found something far, far better. And that's God's spiritual energy.
I like the chapter where you talk about it takes courage to stop negative thinking and gossip. It takes courage to do that. It takes courage to let it go. It really, really does. And I think that a lot of times we hold on to things because we do have that fear that if I let it go, it's going to happen again. Or if I let it go, what will be the outcome of letting it go? Not just trusting that you can't control it anyway. You can, right. Even if you don't let it go, you still can't control the future. And I think for me, that's why holding on to a thing seems like I'm helping myself, but really and truly we're hurting ourselves by holding on and not trusting God. For me, it is God. Trusting God to take care of me in every situation.
Yes, absolutely. And what you're saying is so common to each of us. As if I go back 20 years more than 20 years when I first started practicing presence, I had this feeling as I'm taking 3 breaths, throughout the day, that if I stopped thinking, I was going to miss something, And what I realized, and I was right, but what I was going to miss was all the misery I create when I'm in an unconscious state. So as we practice presence and the inner confidence builds through inner conditioning, it becomes not a very difficult thing to stop the negativity, not when it takes us over, but before it takes us over. Because it always starts with thought, then a negative emotion, then a negative reaction. As we become more present, we stop it at thought before it hits negative emotion and negative. And that's the power of God's presence.
Wow. Let's get a break here. When we come back, we're going to tell people how we can connect with the book and how you got so wise in finding presence. Stay on point. We're back after this. So what do you want people to know, Jim? Because it's really been all about me.
Well, for me personally, is, look, God has told us how to stop our inner fears and inner conflicts. There are too many people suffering that do not have to be suffering. If they put their trust in God through the practice of presence, through bringing in stillness, that has the power to change every aspect of my life, your life, and everyone's life.
Right. And in presence, really what we're talking about is being in the presence of God or being in the presence of whatever deity that you ascribe to, and just trusting that it's going to be okay. And it seems so easy. It really does. It's that dichotomy of really, really seeming easy, but being so seeming simple, but really it is a challenge.
Yeah. Well, it's a challenge until we realize that we're not doing the changing. All we're doing is bringing in stillness, and each of us can do that. The actual change comes from God's Spirit. So it's not so much what we do, it's what's being done to us when we bring in stillness. That's the power that changes us, that power that is beyond us and at the same time working through us. And the reason our mind can't figure it out is because our mind cannot figure out what's beyond our mind.
Our mind can't figure out what's beyond our mind.
And God, Spirit, is beyond our mind. It's in our heart.
Talk about resistance.
Resistance is our biggest enemy. And all of us in our daily lives, there's resistance to the average person, probably many times throughout the day. And the only thing that stops resistance to doing the practice of presence is the experience we have when we bring in stillness and the realization that we really do, as God said, have a connection to his Spirit, to know he is God. Knowing is very important because knowing is different than believing. Believing is good. Knowing is an experience that is undeniable. No one's going to tell you, for instance, how much you love your children, your husband,
right,
or my wife and my children. No one's going to tell me I don't love them. It's innate in me as it is in you. And that is what the practice of presence, that is what God instills in us. That if we trust in him, he will take care of every obstacle in our way. And he will always bring us through it. If, again, we trust in his Spirit.
Right.
But we're not going to have confidence in that trust in his Spirit unless we actually practice presence.
Right. And in presence is where the fullness of joy is what Scripture says. But in that presence is also relational, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. 100%. Yes. That's what it's all about. It's that intimate relationship with God. And the intimate relationship with God can only be done the way God told us to do it. And that is being still.
Mm-hmm. Being still and spending the time. And I think, for a lot of people, we've worn this busy badge for so long that we feel like we're too busy. And when you were talking about intermittently doing it, I think that that's kind of been the path that I've been on, because I felt like, you just had to be still. But I'm going to get better, because when you learn better, you're supposed to do better. So one of the things I really, really appreciate, Jim, about the app is the way that the app allows you to check in with yourself.
Yes.
And it asks you, and the voice is so calm and so soothing. And the voice asks you how you feel. Do you feel peace? And if you don't feel peace, then you're dealing with that as well. Talk about the three questions that are so important.
Oh yes, absolutely. Three questions are so important because it's sort of we're checking our spiritual progress.
Right.
A better word, in the sense of, like, the first question is, am I present now? As
right.
We're taking in a deep breath and then we're letting
and
the breath out.
And it makes you think about it. Am I present, or is my mind racing? Am I present in this moment right now?
Yes, absolutely. And then the second question is, how do I feel inside in this moment? And you answer that question as you breathe. And the third question, do I have a sense of peace at some level? And you'll immediately get a response.
Right.
And let's say you don't have a sense of peace, you just continue to take those breaths, and a few more, and you will be there. And that's what God told us.
And tell me about, the hands on the heart and the oxytocin and what that does.
Yeah, the reason I put I had I can't think of the book I read, this was years ago, and it spoke about putting your hand over your heart. And when you put your hand over your heart and you breathe and meditate, okay, that you release. It helps release a hormone called oxytocin, which is a relaxing type of hormone. Funny example: my youngest son and his wife had their first child about 2 years ago, and in after my granddaughter was born, Valentina, she was on oxytocin in the hospital.
Wow.
As sort of a sedative. And I just took that as, wow, this is powerful stuff. But putting our hand over our heart helps release that hormone. But what's so good about the app is that it goes step by step about what our intention is. And intention is so important. If we don't have the right intention, what happens to our breathing, it just becomes a biological practice. But when we breathe with intention of connecting with God's spiritual energy, it becomes a spiritual practice. Mm-hmm. We're relying on the power of spirit to change us from the inside, so it changes everything we do outside. Mm-hmm. See, when you're present, you can't have resentments or anxiety or worry or lack of self-esteem. They don't exist in the present moment. They only exist when we're outside the present moment, in our unobserved mind, our unconscious mind. That's why we are our most stable, our most secure, and our most confident when we are consciously present.
Wow. How do people get the book, Jim, and how do they connect with the incredible work that you're doing?
Well, first, you can get the book on Amazon, okay? And naturally, the app is free. And that was the intention. Well, even the book, any proceeds from the book goes to charity. I'm doing this that's what I want. It was given to me free. I'm giving it away free. Wow. And as a matter of fact, we're in the progress of making a study guide for the book, which we should have out over the next couple of months to make it easier for groups or families to actually practice presence. Mm-hmm.
I think that's, I think that every family, and especially people who love God and who trust God and who are filled with anxiety and fear and uncertainty, to connect with it. And as I said, I'm just reading it bit by bit because I don't want this to just be a book. I want it to really go down into my spirit and do what the intention is for it to do. And it's really to help people to be free. You know, we're so in our heads and in our what's going on and what happened and what's going to happen and how is it going to happen, that a lot of times you just miss that moment. You miss the present.
Sure.
And the presence.
Absolutely. We get lost in thoughts. And that's exactly what happens when we're unconscious. And unfortunately, 80% of those thoughts become negative.
Wow. Jim, thank you so much for taking the time. The book is called Choosing Presence: How to Access God's Peace and Release Fear, Anxiety, and Stress. It is an incredible, incredible work. Thank you so much.
And thank you. When I get the study guide done, I'm going to send it to you.
Absolutely. And then when you get it done, you can show us how we can walk through it and how we can have those small, intimate groups where everybody is wanting to tap in. And this is a real way to do it.
Yes. Thank you.
Indeed. Thank you, too. Hey, everybody, stay on point. We're back after this.
Taking 3 conscious breaths or more every hour with the intention of connecting with God's spiritual energy is a powerful spiritual practice that renews us throughout the day and humbles us because we become aware that we cannot change ourselves without experiencing God's Spirit within us. Here's how it's done.